The heat is building across southern areas to end the week, but it's unlikely to last many more than 3 days of this 10-day trend, as we'll then return into the cooler, more unsettled setup we've been in so far this July. The reason we've been in that setup? Well, we've been on the northern side of the jet stream. Here's the jet stream here, sweeping across the Atlantic, and over the next few days, its position will change. It becomes a more amplified pattern, diving down well to the south of the UK and taking low pressure systems up to the north and west of the UK. But as we head towards the weekend, Sunday most likely, the return of the stronger jet core to affect the UK. So it is going to turn a bit more unsettled by Sunday and certainly cooler again. But before then, as the jet stream dives down to the south, that will allow more of a southerly wind direction, and that will allow us to tap into this warmer continental air, the warmest direction at this time of year. So the heat will build, likely peaking on Friday before a weather front sweeps across the country, introducing that fresher air from the north and west by Sunday. So a bit of a change to come through the weekend, but before then, we do have that heat to build. So it's only really going to build across south and eastern areas of England and Wales. Actually, to the north and west, weather fronts are still going to affect these areas, bringing cloudier skies and outbreaks of fairly light rain, but fairly persistent rain. So as I said, in the peak of the heat, we could see 28 degrees on Thursday. That's probably the highest temperature we'll see on Thursday, but widely across England and Wales will be in the mid-20s. 25 degrees is quite likely even across southern areas of Wales and some northern areas of England as well. But where that cloud still lingers, we'll still be in the higher teens, possibly the mid-teens across the far north and west. And there is a bit of a breeze up across northwestern areas where we're closer to low pressure systems. There's very little change as we head into Friday, apart from the fact that we'll start to see that heat build even further, with strong sunshine expected quite widely across England and Wales, very high UV levels as well. The rain will potentially be slightly more restricted to further north and west, bringing some drier weather to parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England, much of Scotland, but there will be quite a bit more cloud around here. So potentially a little bit warmer, extending further north across northeastern areas of England. Eastern Scotland still staying largely dry and seeing temperatures into the low 20s as well, but it will be all that bit breezier further north and west. But looking where the heat really builds, you can see that as the oranges and reds start to arrive on the map, 30, potentially 31 degrees is possible for the greater London area, but quite widely will be in those high 20s across many central and southeastern areas of England as well. So a very warm or hot day to come on Friday, and then we're into that transition period Friday into Saturday. So the further west you are, the more likely you are to see that breakdown into the cooler weather earlier on in the day. There's potential for a bit of a thundery breakdown as well, either across parts of the southeast of England, but also where this weather front lies, we could see some very heavy bursts of rain. It becomes more and more likely as the day progresses. There is some uncertainty on the timings of this weather front, so that's something to keep up to date with over the next few days. But ahead of the weather front, we've still got that heat. Highs of around 29, possibly 30 if the weather front stays at bay for just long enough for that heat to build a bit more widely across eastern areas. But I think that fresher feel is going to arrive as the day goes on from the west. We'll be back down into the high teens, low 20s, a bit closer to average for this time of year, and certainly fresher than it will have been for the end of this week to end the weekend. So, are we going to have a heat wave this week? Well, first of all, let's have a look at the heat wave definition. Well, the heat wave definition depends on the threshold temperature for the region. So quite widely across the UK, that's 25 degrees. But as we get closer to the Greater London region, it increases up to 28 degrees. Now, you don't just need to see your heat wave threshold temperature for one day. You need it for 3 days in a row for it to be defined as a heat wave. Now, the heat is most likely in the south and east, and any heat wave potential is really only restricted to southeastern areas. So we need to zoom in on the south and east, and we'll take 28 degrees. That's our highest threshold temperature as an example. So Thursday is when that heat is starting to build. The probability of 28 degrees, if you look very closely, you can see is only restricted to London or the Greater London region. Outside of that, we will probably see some of those 27 degrees just where those thresholds count. So that could be our first day of the heat wave, but only really for just a couple of locations. And then Friday, well, that's when the heat is likely to peak. So there's a much greater probability of seeing that 28 degrees or more. 30 or 31 degrees is actually likely on Friday for a wider region of southern and central England into parts of South Wales as well. So again, it's this Greater London region where we could be having our second day of the heat wave by this point, but we need that third day. So by Saturday, we're starting to see that cooler air arrive from the west. And so the heat will slowly start to push further east as we see that cooler air arrive. And so there's the potential to see another 28 degrees, but that probability is getting lower as we head towards Saturday. So there's potentially about a 50% chance that we could see that 28 degrees for the Greater London area and some southeastern areas. So I think a few locations across the south and east could technically see a heat wave, but for most of us, it's going to be 1 or 2 days at best of that heat before the cooler air arrives for the latter part of the weekend. And that's because this weather front will be pushing its way eastwards through the country, bringing in this fresher air and this more northwesterly regime. We do see a ridge of high pressure for a time on Sunday, but then as we head into the start of next week, we return to low pressures sweeping in. That's that jet stream returning, moving us into a more changeable setup once again. But we have got the Azores high starting to build in from the south and west, so it's not going to be all wet and windy through next week. Actually, the most likely regime for Monday and Tuesday next week is for this Azores high to extend its influence at least across southern areas of the UK. We could see eastern areas still holding on to that wetter weather clearing away from the weekend, but a ridge of higher pressure just for a couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, is looking fairly likely. However, it is a northwesterly direction, so it's unlikely to be anywhere near as hot as we're expecting to end this coming week. And then, as I said, it's going to change again, so turning more changeable. Yes, we will see ridges of higher pressure, but we could see some low pressure returning as well. So by the time we get to Thursday, the 25th of July, low pressure is moving in from the north and west, returning to that more unsettled picture. So I think westerly wind directions will dominate through much of next week. We could see this high pressure building in from the south and that low pressure building in from the north. So more unsettled weather is probably most likely across northwestern areas, more settled weather sometimes across southern areas, and we'll be battling between those two setups through much of next week. Here is the map for the probabilities of the different regimes for much of next week. Blues show that lower pressure and the yellows and reds show the higher pressure. So here we are to end the weekend, Sunday the 21st of July. We've got those blues moving in, that's low pressure moving in, that cooler regime moving in by Sunday. And then Monday and Tuesday, the yellows arrive. Now this is the Azores high, so that's that south, the more settled weather arriving from the south and west. Then we move back into more unsettled weather, low pressure dominating again, more of a northwesterly coming in to end the week Thursday and Friday. So we'll be oscillating between troughs and ridges, lows and highs through next week. So potentially some more settled spells. And as we've seen for this week, it doesn't take much for us to build the heat just for a couple of days, but it doesn't look like we've got anything particularly prolonged or summer-like on the way for the next 10 days away from the next few days. But you can find out all the details on your forecast for the next couple of days and further ahead by subscribing to our YouTube channel. See you soon. Bye-bye.